In a dispute that has underscored the tension between executive action and judicial authority, the case of Abrego Garcia has emerged as a touchstone for constitutional compliance. Federal courts have repeatedly instructed the Department of Justice to facilitate and effectuate his release from custody in El Salvador, a mandate that the administration has shown a troubling tendency to resist. As the litigation descended through the Fourth Circuit and ultimately to the Supreme Court, it became clear that the basic tenets of the rule of law were at stake. The controversy began when Abrego Garcia, whom U.S. authorities later acknowledged was removed in error, was deported to El Salvador. That admission, made by a senior official during a public hearing, prompted outrage, especially when it led to the dismissal of the government attorney, who had candidly told Judge Zines the truth. This attorney, a career prosecutor of 15 years, was relieved of duty after refusing to mislead the court. The case then proceeded to the Fourth Circuit, where conservative stalwart Judge J. Harvey Wilkinson delivered a forceful opinion. He stressed that compelling basic compliance with court orders is not merely procedural minutiae, but a cornerstone of democratic governance. Upon reaching the Supreme Court, all 9 justices unanimously affirmed the lower court's directives. The High Court underscored a straightforward principle. Once ordered, the executive branch must actively ensure that Abrego Garcia is freed from custody. While the court reminded Judge Zines to have due regard for the foreign policy interests of the executive, it treated this as standard boilerplate rather than a substantive exemption. In other words, absent a credible showing that effectuating his return would cause genuine diplomatic harm, the administration is bound to comply. Returning to Judge Zines' chambers, the government received a clear set of instructions. Begin reporting daily on every measure taken to facilitate and effectuate Abrego Garcia's release. This reporting requirement extends beyond mere updates. It demands sworn declarations, depositions of key officials, and production of relevant documents, all within a 2-week window. At this juncture, however, the Department of Justice has opted for delay and obfuscation rather than diligent compliance. In recent hearings, the government advanced a litany of objections. It has argued, at times, that Judge Zines' request encroaches on executive foreign policy prerogatives. At other moments, it has claimed that certain interrogatories rest on a false premise. Specifically, that the United States has been ordered to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release, despite the Supreme Court's explicit ruling to that effect. Such tactics have not escaped notice. Judge Zines characterized many of these arguments as a hogwash, emphasizing that the government has offered no plausible justification for its refusal to comply. Perhaps most striking has been the department's invocation of privilege. Labels such as a work product, executive privilege, and a deliberative process have been applied indiscriminately without any showing that the prerequisites for these protections satisfied. Under the federal rules, asserting privilege requires a detailed factual basis, identifying the specific communication, its participants, and its legal purpose. The government's failure to meet these standards led Judge Zines to summarily overrule these objections as unwarranted and procedurally deficient. Judge Zines left no stone unturned in her latest order. She systematically denied each of the government's objections, calling them a baseless, inconsistent, or outright demonstrations of bad faith. She reminded the parties that discovery extends to all relevant materials, including actions taken before the case reached federal court, because understanding the chronology of Abrego Garcia's removal is essential to ensuring proper relief. The court set a firm deadline for answers. All information must be provided by 6 p.m. on Wednesday following the order's issuance. The press noted the severity of the hearing, with some outlets describing the sessions as a bloodbath in which the Justice Department found itself on the defensive. Yet Judge Zines stopped short of holding the government in contempt, at least for now. Instead, she issued a stern warning. Continued non-compliance will trigger formal contempt proceedings, which could escalate rapidly if the department persists in its gamesmanship. Looking ahead, the case appears poised to enter its next phase, a contempt proceedings, potentially followed by emergency appeals. The administration may seek relief from the Fourth Circuit or even return to the Supreme Court. arguing that Judge Zenes has exceeded her authority. However, given the unanimity of the High Court's earlier decision, it is difficult to predict any deviation from its directive. At its heart, this dispute carries profound implications. For Abrego Garcia, each day spent in wrongful detention constitutes irreparable harm. For the judiciary, the case tests the limits of its power to enforce compliance against the executive branch. And for the nation, the litigation serves as a reminder that adherence to court orders is not optional, even for the highest offices of the United States government. As this saga unfolds, the delicate balance between branches of government and the rule of law itself hangs in the balance. Judge Zenes's forthcoming actions will hinge on whether the Department of Justice heeds her directive or continues its pattern of delay. Should the government fail to produce the requested materials by the prescribed deadline, the court is prepared to issue an order to show cause, laying the groundwork for formal contempt proceedings. Such a finding would empower the court to impose sanctions, including daily fines against responsible officials or even sequestration of records. At that juncture, the administration would almost certainly file an emergency application with the Fourth Circuit, seeking a stay of enforcement. If denied, a return to the Supreme Court could follow within days, testing the highest tribunal's willingness to reinforce its own mandate. Beyond procedural skirmishes, this litigation underscores the delicate interplay between judicial oversight and executive discretion. Internal memoranda and diplomatic correspondence, now potentially subject to disclosure, may reveal the extent to which foreign policy considerations were invoked to justify non-cooperation. Should those communications prove that the department knowingly misconstrued Judge Zenes's order, it would bolster her finding of a bad faith refusal to comply. Conversely, any legitimate evidence of credible foreign policy risk could compel the court to calibrate its directives, underscoring the Supreme Court's admonition to have due regard for the executive branch's prerogatives. Legal scholars have seized upon the Abrego Garcia case as a textbook example of separation of powers, tensions. Professor Amelia Hart of Georgetown University Law Center described it as a clear reminder that no branch operates in a vacuum. The courts must enforce their judgments, even when inconvenient to the executive. Similarly, constitutional expert Dr. Robert Liu has noted that this is among the rare instances where the Supreme Court has unanimously affirmed remedial relief against the government, signaling the universality of judicial authority. Such commentary suggests that the outcome will resonate far beyond this individual's fate. Should contempt be formally imposed, the administration faces not only legal penalties, but also reputational costs. A finding that the United States willfully defied a Supreme Court order could strain relationships with foreign partners who may question America's reliability as a treaty and rule of law adherent. Moreover, ongoing congressional scrutiny of executive accountability could intensify, with legislators demanding oversight hearings to investigate the Justice Department's handling of the case. In this way, Abrego Garcia's plight could catalyze broader reforms aimed at preventing future miscarriages of justice. Ultimately, the Abrego Garcia litigation represents more than a dispute over one individual's removal. It is a barometer of institutional integrity. Each development, from depositions of senior officials to emergency appeals, will chart the contours of executive-judicial relations for years to come. As the Department of Justice decides whether to cooperate or contest, the judiciary stands ready to enforce its orders, reaffirming the principle that compliance with the law is non-negotiable. In the coming weeks, observers will watch closely. The rule of law itself depends on the answer.